Thank you for joining me on the show today, Officer Gomez. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Well, thanks for having me. I am Officer Gomez. I am a school resource officer in Idaho, and I am a current school resource officer. So I work at the school with a full patrol uniform, a patrol truck, and I deal with kids every single day.
That is that takes a lot of stress management, I'm sure, to deal with kids every day, like that sort of thing. So that's really cool. So what led you to a career in law enforcement, and what specifically led you to be an SRO?
So I started my life off as an engineer. I have a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering technology. Um, I joined mountain search and rescue on my spare time while being an engineer, and I liked the adventures of all the going in the mountains and rescuing people. And one day I saw an ad in the paper for police department, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to try that." I was a little older than most of the other recruits, but it was a dream of mine for a long time, so I went for it. And it was like American Idol. Every week, different people would drop out for different things. And at the end of 2 or 3 months of eliminating people, myself and five other people were chosen to be police officers. And I became a police officer for the city of Meridian, right next to Boise. It's a large city, so it was a big agency I went to work for.
Very cool. So you've had the experience of, being an engineer, you've tried your hand at now at law enforcement. What was it that really inspired you to go work in the schools?
So when I became an officer, my demeanor was really good at de-escalating things. And I
Very
also
good.
really gravitated towards juveniles. Now, a lot of police are not juvenile friendly because police like to just tell people what to do. And kids sometimes don't want to do what somebody tells them to do. So I
Right.
was very good at de-escalating kids, working with them. So when a position came up 3 years after I'd been on patrol, they said, "Hey, we have a middle school opening for a school resource officer. We would really like you to take that position and see how you do."
That's cool. Yeah, de-escalation is obviously a huge part of being a police officer, and I think it's great that you realized that that was a talent that you could use to help kids. Because you're right, kids don't always want to do what they're instructed to do. So share with us a little bit about what your duties are as a school resource officer.
As a school resource officer, my main duty is the safety of the kids and the staff and the community. My second, not so much duty, but my second job at the school is to build relationships with the kids, right? That is, I'm their second parent, I'm their second teacher, I'm their second everything. And some of these kids don't have those things at home. So building relationship with the kids, learning, what's important to them, learning what they're about, and ultimately, that helps me keep the school safe because I can see problems coming before they get to me. I also became very good at finding runaways, at locating drugs, at dealing with kids with drugs, while at the same time trying not to just kick everybody out. Right. So my philosophy became very quickly: the kids who are in the most trouble needed me the most.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a really good point. You talk about relationship building with the kids. Is there a resistance to that, or or as the kids, you talked about being in a school that, goes from younger to older. Is there like a good age where it's good to build a relationship, and then maybe it's a little bit more difficult as they get older? What's that like?
It gets a little more difficult as they get older, just because kids don't always trust the adults in their lives, and they definitely don't always trust police. And the kids who need you the most have probably had some bad police experiences because of
Mm,
their parents. So I take all that into account when I'm talking to kids. And a lot of building a relationship is listening.
yeah. Yeah.
Tell me your story. What are you about? What are your concerns? How can I help you? Right now, I
That
do that every time. If I show up, even at the craziest situations that I show up to with, domestic violence or somebody threatening, lives, I always start off by, "Hey, I'm Officer Gomez. How can I help you today?"
mm. So do you find that helps like disarm the situation when you come in and say, "Hey, I'm here to help," and then you can just kind of build from there?
Yes, I do. I say, "Hey, tell me about yourself. Tell me what's special about yourself. Tell me what you can do. Tell me what you like. When was the last time you were happy? How can we find a common ground?" And I've over my lifetime I've found lots of common grounds. I do magic tricks with cards. It's like David Copperfield and Officer Gomez is next. I play a couple of instruments just slightly. I love, dad jokes. So I try and find things in common with everybody. And there's not a human being that I can't find a common connection with somehow. And
Very
that helps
cool.
disarm them. And then, ultimately, I want them to know I'm on their team. But, and that's being consistent as well, where you're not going to get away with things just because I know you, I'm going to be consistent all the way through.
That's a good point to be consistent all the way through. Um, in your work in the schools, I'm going to ask you a question that I don't think there is a right answer to this question. I've seen a lot about this. Do you think mobile phones should be allowed in schools for students? What's your perspective on that?
Okay, so this is a two-pronged question. Number
Hmm.
one is, should they be allowed in schools during class time as babysitters or carrots for getting your work done? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
Should they be allowed in somebody's backpack or pocket in case there's some kind of emergency or something like that? I am totally fine with that. The problem is that we have a hard time in schools differentiating between the two,
Hmm.
right? And when a school says, hey, we're going to get rid of cell phones, such as our school, we mean you're not going to be able to use them in class.
Hmm.
Especially teachers these days, some of them have gone to rely on cell phones. They'll give a Google packet, and when kids are done with their Google packet, they can get on their cell phones and be on social media.
Hmm.
That causes a lot of drama, a lot of problems for teachers. It causes disconnection at the school. So, absolutely not for cell phones in the classroom for any reason. I'm totally fine with them having a cell phone in their pocket, in their backpack for, whatever they need emergency situations.
Right. Yeah. So it's just really more to have access to parents, to have access to information, but not necessarily to play around on, right?
Correct. And there's a lot of playing around, especially if some kind of drama happens at the beginning of the day. Those cell phones are going to be used inappropriately all day long. And that takes away from the education that we should be putting a lot of importance on.
Right. Right. Um, so what do you think is the biggest struggle that kids are facing today in school? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the classroom, but what do you think is the biggest thing that is troubling students today?
So one of the bigger things that I see that, is kind of different from everybody else is their self-worth. A lot of kids
Hmm.
don't have any self-worth because they spend so much time on social media. Families have gotten away from family dinners. Families have gotten away from family outings. They've gotten away from church. They've gotten away from communities. So every child becomes their own little island.
Hmm.
And unless you're a family that preaches, hey, look, this is what you're worth. We're worth honor, integrity. We help people out. We do these things. What happens is children start becoming worth social media values, right? So when I ask a child, hey, what are you worth? I start getting all this, social media propaganda back that
Hmm.
doesn't help anybody, right? I need kids that, hey, they know they're honorable. They know they have integrity. They know what their family stands for. And we're missing that these days, which causes the problems at the schools, for teachers, for community members, for everybody, but most of all for the kids themselves because they do not know what they stand for.
Right. So when they understand what they stand for, they understand the value that they see in themselves. That's not only going to help them academically and socially, but just overall in life, right?
Correct. It's a baseline, and I always tell the kids, hey, twos don't marry tens and tens don't marry twos. Where are we at? Right. And
Very good.
further than that, I tell them, hey, look, I put you as a five in high school. How do we get to a two? Right? Drugs, alcohol, tobacco, don't do your homework, be disrespectful, don't show up to class. How do we get from a five to a 10? Hey, join the choir, do sports, read, plan your college or plan adventures, get languages. 1,000 ways for you to get up to a 10 from a five. But that stuff matters in high school probably more than anywhere else in your life.
Right. And so let me ask you, in your police work outside of schools, do you see people who don't value themselves as adults? Does that contribute to their issues?
Absolutely. And that, it basically starts a cycle that goes generational, right? So if adults don't value themselves, they surely can't teach their kids how to value themselves, right? And so then we start this cycle, and it is hard to get out of that. And that is one of my biggest struggles. But I also have a lot of teachers who fill in for parents who don't value themselves. And we try and be that person that not only sets the example, but tells these kids, hey, we believe in you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I think if the more grounded a person is, the more they know their value, the less likely they are to act out and the better they are to contribute.
Yes, because they see a value in school. If you don't know why you're going to school, if you don't turn in your homework, you feel like an alien there, right? You feel like you have no control over your life. We take in high risk teens in our house, and one of the biggest things we can do to improve their value is get their homework done, right?
Hmm,
Because as soon as they get their homework done, all of a sudden they feel like they have some control over themselves, over their life. And the other thing we tell them is who is in control of your thoughts and emotions, right? And the more we can give to that kid, the better off they're going to be.
very cool. In thinking about, students protecting themselves, what do you think kids need to know about that? What sort of perspective they need to have about, hey, my safety kind of is my responsibility. What can we do to help them understand that?
So one of the big things I like to teach kids, your decisions matter. A
Mm,
lot of kids grow up thinking, hey, my decisions don't matter till I'm 18. I can do whatever I want. But really at 10, 11, 12, especially with social media and internet connectivity, your decisions matter a lot, right?
yeah,
And not, from there on out, you can make life altering decisions that will affect your entire life at 10, 11, 12, 13.
yeah,
Right. So then I tell the kids, hey, you need to be the friend you want to have, but protect each other. Get some circles of friends that you trust, that you are going to watch out for, that are going to watch out for you. And that's a skill you can use your entire life. But I try and tell them as much as I can that their decisions do matter.
right. And you think about it, back in, high school in 1990, your decisions absolutely mattered. But now when you add in the layer of social media and how what you post doesn't really go away, that really kind of ups the ante, right?
Yes. And back in 1990, a predator had to get within your physical circle to have an effect on
Yes.
you. Now, and your physical circle, you had 100 people that could get inside of your physical circle in your life. Now you have millions of people that can get inside of your circle because of social media.
Right. So that kind of leads me into my next question here. What are the conversations that you feel like parents need to be having with their kids so that they can make good decisions?
Every conversation about everything under the sun, right? But more so, they need to be the example, right? And being the
Mm,
example means having dinner with your kids, means going out and having your kids see you get upset over somebody cutting you off in traffic. And how are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle when your dinner doesn't come as ordered? How are you going to handle when somebody upsets you politically on Facebook, right? If you jump up and down and scream and yell, guess what? You are teaching your kids those things. And so parents really have to set the example on how they want kids to act in everything, but you can't set the example on everything. So then you have to have the conversations. I always say, a good way to have those conversations. Hey, look over the newspaper. What kind of things happen? What kind of things, what caused this? What could somebody have done differently in these situations? And how are we going to handle those situations with our family values that we have?
right. That's good. So we talked about you brought up how predators have more access because they don't necessarily have to be in a physical circle. I've talked about this on my show. I would really like for you to walk us through what is the typical procedure that you see happening with predators making contact with kids. How is that flowing today?
Okay, so today predators can contact kids on Roblox, they contact them on Snapchat, they contact them on the Bible application, they contact them on Fitbit, they contact them on any kind of internet connected application they're connecting them to them with. And what the predators do, they know they need to get an emotional hook in the kids.
Hmm,
And so a lot of times that emotional hook is like, oh, hey, you look like a nice person. I'm kind of sad today. My dog died, or my grandma's sick, or I have cancer. They try and make them an emotional hook. Then pretty soon that turns to alienating them from your family. Hey, because every kid's going to have a bad day. Well, then the predators come in and say, hey, your dad doesn't understand you like I do, or your mom just doesn't know, how teens work. I do. And I'm glad that we're friends because you help me and I help you. And that's how we get going. So that's one way they do it. Right now, one of the biggest scams going is predators who are adult, they could be men or women who download pictures off any pornography website and pretend to be that person and contact kids and have them send naked pictures to each other.
right.
And that is such a powerful way in for predators to get the kids that kids don't have a chance, right? And I tell parents, I said, like 80% of kids are going to fall for that scam.
Mm,
And then pretty
Mhm.
soon they're going to be in the middle of a sextortion plot. And parents just don't understand how prevalent those things are and how many people around the world are doing that. And once that girl contacts these boys, I mean, this is their first relationship. Parents don't understand how powerful that is. And then when they introduce pornography, again, parents don't understand how powerful that is. And you'd like to think that your kid would kind of recognize, hey, this is a fake girl that's sending you topless pictures of herself. But they don't, because their biology is kicking in, their brain
Right.
isn't thinking correctly, and pretty soon some really bad things are happening. You're up to where kids are committing suicide because of it.
Right. Now you mentioned an important word just a second ago, sextortion. For those who are listening who don't quite know what that is, can you explain what that entails?
So sextortion with boys or with girls, what happens is they send their naked picture out. Some of them send it to boyfriend, girlfriend. Some of it send it to sextortionists. Whatever the reason is, there's many kids send out their nude photos. In fact, I'd say by 11th grade, about 80% of kids have sent out nudes. So a bad actor gets involved in that and gets their naked photo, and they will usually Snapchat them their own photo back to them. Hey, look, I have a copy of your naked photo. And they'll send them a little small video clip of their own Instagram friends list. And they'll say, you have 2 hours to come up with $400 in iTunes cards, or else I'm going to send your naked picture to all your Instagram friends.
Right.
And then they start a timer. And, a lot of people, okay, I don't have $400. So then the predators are very good at this. They say, hey, look, go steal a credit card from mom or dad. When they ask you about why this charge, say, hey, look, I accidentally bought Fortnite skins. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Right. Or I bought Robux or V-Bucks or whatever they bought. They have a plan for them to do this. And kids will follow along because they don't want that picture being leaked out to everybody. So that is sextortion, basically exchanging the, hey, I'm going to remain quiet about whatever intimate thing I have over you in exchange for, it's usually gift cards or more pictures, right? A lot of times, especially with girl pictures, somebody at the school will get a copy of a picture from one of the classmates and they'll tell the girl, hey, look, I got this picture, send me new ones or else I'm going to share this one with everybody I know. So that
Right.
is also sextortion.
Right. So, and it just snowballs out of control. But something very important that you said that I think a lot of parents don't get is that the kids are taking the photos of themselves. It's not somebody else, sneaking into their bedroom taking the picture. They're the ones that are doing it, right?
They are the ones doing it. And a lot of parents have a hard time believing that. But the problem is they don't understand that as soon as you give your child a phone, they are being groomed by millions of people around the world and they're being desensitized to sexual situations. And so then over time, especially with TikTok challenges, kids are groomed to be worth their body parts.
Mm,
Right. So
yeah.
then when somebody asks them, hey, send me nudes, to a kid, it's no big deal. It's almost, like, hey, shake hands, because to them, that is what they are worth. They know, hey, look, I'm going to get some acceptance if I send them nude photos.
Right. And you just said an important word there, worth. And we talked about that earlier. So if we pour into our kids what their value is, do you think there's a less likely of a chance of them taking these types of photos or falling for these types of scams?
Absolutely. There is a less chance, not foolproof, but there's
Right.
definitely a less chance, right? Because kids are kids, they're going to make mistakes. And we want to keep those mistakes as small as possible. But the more self value you can put on them, the more you discuss this with them, the better, right? And this is a rinse and repeat discussion. You got to have this discussion weekly with them, especially if they're on social media a lot.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of parents out there who are very resistant to talk about this sort of thing with their kids. What's, from your experience, a good way to kind of approach these things? Obviously it's not sit them down, hey, we need to have a very important conversation right now, or they think they're in trouble. How do parents broach these sensitive topics?
So in our house, we do tribal council every Friday night. Good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. We do a Friday night tribal council. And that way it's not, hey, we need to meet about this crazy thing. Our family's now in DEFCON 4, come immediately, right? It's, hey, we're going to have a tribal council Friday night. And sometimes we just discuss, hey, look, we're proud of you this week for this. Next week, this is what's on the schedule. What would you guys like to, we call it an itch list. What's on your itch list for the next month? Right. And that way you have a regular Friday night meeting or whenever you want to make it, or a weekend meeting. Now, hey, look, we want to talk to you guys about sextortion. Right. And kids are going to go, oh, right. And you say, hey, I'm talking to you about this because it's a real thing. It's happening to people. I see it on the news. In fact, let's look at the news. Right. This kid over here, he got sextortioned. these things happen. Somebody shared their picture here. The kids know it's real. You just have to, your kids. Let's bring it up and try and bring it up in a non-awkward way. But since the dawn of time, parents and kids talking about sex to each other is awkward. And it
Yeah.
goes both ways, right? Because I talk to kids, when I talk to them about it, they're like, Gomez, yeah, I don't want my parents talking to me about sex. And it's just weird. And I tell kids are like, well, they know I have sex. Why do we got to talk about it? I said, because they need you to know some things, because sex can ruin your life in an instant.
Right. Yeah. If you're not ready, if you're not mature enough, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there a story that you'd like to share with us about your time as an SRO where you really felt like you made an impact or you saw a great change in somebody's life? Is there a story that kind of floats to the top for you?
So I have many awesome stories, right? I mean, as many bad stories I got, I have some awesome stories. But I've had one of the ones that floats up to in my mind is I was involved in an arrest of a juvenile runaway.
Hmm.
And I took her to the hospital because she didn't have, her mom was in the homeless shelter with no phones. They're locked down. This girl was at a party when I ran into her. She's a runaway. I tried to take her juvenile detention. They said, hey, she's too high on something. You have to take her to the hospital first. So I took her to the hospital first. And I had to sign for some paperwork for her, basically kind of being her guardian. But I'm asking her, it's like, hey, isn't there anybody in your whole life that I can call to come here and be at the hospital with you? Right? Because they were going to put an IV in her and all. And she said, no, all I have is my mom. We've been homeless for 6 months. And I actually sent somebody to try and get to her mom.
Right.
But I ended up staying at the hospital for 2 or 3 hours with her. At the end, she gave me a hug in her handcuffs, right?
Hmm.
Because we handcuff kids so they don't run away from us again, because that would be
Right.
embarrassed. But she knew I cared about her. Well, I told that story at my school, and one of the kids there at the school drew a picture just from the story, drew a picture of a police officer and a girl in handcuffs hugging the police officer. Well, we use that picture for all kinds of nice things around the school, and do the right and be kind to people, because you don't know what their story is.
Right. Right. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Right. And I
Uh,
share that one on my social media page every once in a while, because it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But I run into those kind of things all the time. As a police officer, we see a lot of dark, ugly things.
sure.
But when we see those dark, ugly things, we also see people that take their turn to step up and do the right thing. That's when people have the opportunity to be courageous. And we see it all the time. You just have to look.
Very cool. Very cool. So, as a school resource officer, is there one thing that you'd like to see done at like every school to make it a safer place for the students and for the faculty?
So that's a tough question about making things safer. I mean, the best thing to do is build relationships with the school, right? Once you start building relationships as a school resource officer, or as a faculty, as an administrator, you build relationships with the kids. They're going to warn you when bad things are coming to the school,
Mm,
if possible, right? I mean, I've had multiple students alert me to two would-be school shooters who were former students. Now,
hmm.
that doesn't account for all the school shooters. Sometimes you're just going to have a random person come in,
Right.
right? So every state trains differently. And I just, hey, communicate what you're going to do to train, talk to each other, have some plans in place, whatever those plans are. They kind of have to be tailored to the school in specific. So there's some schools I go to, and I go teach at a lot of schools, where the SRO doesn't talk to the admin, or the admin doesn't talk to the teachers, or the teachers don't have anything to do with the PTA, right? And so they're all their own little island, and that's no good for anybody, right? A
Right.
school should be a place of love and learning, and it's hard to learn without the love and somebody caring about you.
Yeah, that is. You were talking about, you mentioned this earlier too, that you like to see trouble before it starts. You've had kids alert you to problems. For the teachers that are listening, what are some common either yellow flags or red flags that you've seen with students that they can kind of get ahead of things if they see these things developing?
And teachers are really good at seeing this, because they have kids with them all the time. But you see an attitude change, you see a friend change, and it's kind of tough with teens, because if you have a teen, their attitudes change anyways, right? So you just kind of look for other things. Hey, look, this is not normal with this kid. And a lot of times, just go with your intuition. And even if you're wrong, pull the student aside after class. Hey, can I talk to you a minute? Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help you? And in our school, we do one better. Every other Wednesday, we meet and we talk about our high risk kids.
Good.
So we have a principal, we actually have the prosecuting attorney, the defense attorney, a judge, we have our juvenile justice system, we have the principals, and we have any teachers that want to be involved in that. So that way we can help as a community do the best we can for our at-risk kids. And any teacher, any admin can add a kid or take a kid off. Hey, this kid, I think we've helped them. We'll take them off the list. But I'd like to add this other kid that I'm concerned about. And that could be anywhere from a kindergartner to a senior in high school.
Very good. I like the proactive approach to, talking about how to help kids so that that worst case scenario doesn't happen. That's really good. That's really good.
Right. And then when we do have to do something by the court, the prosecuting attorney knows them, the defense attorney knows them, the judge knows them, they know what we've tried. And a lot of times, I'll suggest something or we'll talk about it. Hey, how can we best help this kid? Right. Because
Right.
sometimes, bringing a big stick isn't the answer. Sometimes bringing a lot of love is the answer. But
Right.
we've got to try multiples.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Officer Gomez, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
So if they just type in Officer Gomez on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. I've been trying to up my YouTube videos. So I do, small segments just to get people an easier way to talk. That's another easy way to talk to your kids. Watch one of my videos, watch any video and say, hey, Officer Gomez said this. What do you think about that? Is he right, wrong? And, I'm totally fine with people disagreeing with me. In fact, I love people disagree. And there's some people that have some fabulous disagreements. And half the learning on my Facebook page is from the parents who comment.
Yeah. And good. So I feel like that's another form of community right there that you're building online.
Yes. And I love it. And I love the information I get. I love all the sharing that happens. And, it's all education for everybody.
Very cool. Speaking of your social media stuff, not long ago, I saw you had to deal with two peacocks being in the road. I mean, all the other stuff that you have going on, you also have to deal with peacocks now.
I had to deal with two peacocks that were blocking traffic in the road. In Boise County, we have lots of animals. We have cougars and bears and all kinds of things, but the peacocks were a little different. That wasn't something I was expecting, and they were not totally cooperative, but
Very cool. Are those native to your area, or did they get out of somebody's, pets? Or were they pets or something?
so people raise peacocks around here and they get
Okay.
out, but peacocks can live around here on their own because we have a couple places where there's peacocks that have gotten away and never gone back. They can forage and live on their own in this area. Even when we have lots of snow, they can still live in our environment.
That's
It's
crazy.
amazing.
That's awesome. Well, Officer Gomez, thank you so much for being here, for expanding on, what we're talking about being protector parents, man. God bless you and your mission.
Well, thank you. And thank you for getting the word out and helping with the same thing. I love everybody that helps me help kids, right? Every kid needs a champion. And it doesn't have to be a police officer, it doesn't have to be some hero. I mean, it can be the janitor, it can be any single person that cares about a kid. And sometimes all you got to do is say, hi, how are you doing?
Very cool. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks so much.